The moment Patricia set the teacup in front of me, I knew something wasn't right. My mother-in-law smiled as she watched me lift the cup. "Does the tea taste strange?" she asked, her voice sweet but her eyes sharp. I took a slow sip and looked straight at her. "No," I replied. "It tastes just fine. My name is Olivia. I'm 32 years old, and for the last 5 years, Patricia has done everything she could to drive me out of her son Mark's life. But this time, she had crossed a dangerous line. 2 weeks earlier, I noticed Patricia working in my garden, planting flowers I had never seen before. She had always mocked my gardening skills, so her sudden interest felt suspicious. Not long after that, she began insisting on weekly family dinners, something she had avoided for years. "I just want this family to be closer," she said with an awkward smile. I might have believed her if I hadn't caught her one night searching for poisonous plants on her laptop. Before she slammed it shut, I clearly saw words like untraceable and symptoms on the screen. That was enough for me. I called my friend Emma, a toxicologist, and shared everything I had seen. Together, we came up with a plan. Now I sat across from Patricia at her dining table. Mark was working late, leaving us alone. "How convenient. You've become very interested in herbs lately," I said as I placed my cup down. She froze for a split second before forcing a smile. "I've just been trying new things." I nodded. "Really? Then tell me about the purple-flowered plant you're growing in my garden." Her smile disappeared. "I don't know what you're talking about." "That's strange," I replied, pulling out my phone, "because I have pictures of you planting it. It's called aconitum, also known as wolfsbane." Her face instantly lost its color. "It's one of the most poisonous plants in the world." I don't. You know," I continued calmly, "it's difficult to identify unless investigators know exactly what to test for." Patricia jumped to her feet. "You're making this up." I remained seated. "Actually, I'm feeling perfectly fine because I've been preparing for this moment." Her hands began to shake. "You're lying." I reached into my bag and placed a small voice recorder on the table. "Our entire conversation has been recorded. I also have security footage of you planting the flowers and screenshots of your online searches." "You went through my computer?" she whispered. I shook my head. "I didn't have to. You should have been more careful about leaving evidence behind." Then I stood. "My lawyer already has copies of everything. If anything ever happens to me, all of it goes straight to the police." Patricia collapsed back into her chair, realizing her plan had completely unraveled. "You don't understand," she muttered. "Mark deserves someone better. Someone from a respectable family. Someone you can control?" I interrupted. Silence filled the room. Before she could answer, the front door opened. "Mom? Olivia?" "Sorry I'm late," Mark called from the hallway. Patricia's eyes widened with panic. I leaned toward her and spoke quietly. "You have one chance. Tell him the truth, or I will." A moment later, Mark walked into the dining room, looking from me to his mother with a puzzled expression. "You're home early," I said with a calm smile. "Your mother and I were just discussing her new gardening hobby." Mark sensed the tension immediately, while Patricia gripped the edge of the table, unable to hide her trembling hands. "What's going on?" Mark asked as he stepped into the dining room. His eyes moved from me to his mother. "Mom, are you okay?" Before Patricia could answer, I unlocked my phone and showed him the photos. "Your mother has been growing some very unusual plants in my garden," I said calmly. "Maybe she'd like to explain why she planted wolfsbane." Mark looked at the screen, then back at Patricia. "Wolfsbane?" he asked. "Isn't that a deadly poison?" Patricia suddenly broke down in tears. But these weren't the dramatic tears she usually used to gain sympathy. She looked frightened. "It's not what you think," she whispered. "I was only trying to protect you." "Protect me?" Mark repeated, confused. His eyes drifted to the teacup sitting in front of me. His expression changed instantly. "Mom," he said quietly. "What did you do?" Without saying a word, I placed the voice recorder on the table and pressed play. The room filled with Patricia's voice, her fake concern, her nervous questions, and finally her panic when she realized I knew exactly what she had done. When the recording ended, silence took over. Mark slowly lowered himself into a chair, staring at his mother in disbelief. You tried to poison Olivia? He asked. My wife. Patricia suddenly snapped. She isn't good enough for you, she shouted. She turned you against me. Everything was perfect before she came into your life. Perfect, Mark replied, his voice rising. You mean when you controlled every decision I made? When every woman I dated disappeared because you chased them away? I gently touched his arm. There's something else. I handed him my phone again. On the screen were screenshots of Patricia's internet searches, poisonous plants, symptoms, detection methods, and ways to avoid being caught. Mark slowly read each one. You planned this, he whispered. For weeks. Patricia dropped her head. I only wanted what was best for you. Mark stood, his fists clenched.
No, Mom.
You wanted what was best for yourself. You tried to murder my wife. But I didn't succeed, Patricia cried. She didn't drink enough. Because I knew what you were planning, I answered. I was ready for this. But you still chose to poison my tea. Mark reached for his phone. I'm calling the police. I gently placed my hand over his. Wait. He looked at me. Let's give her one chance to tell the truth. Maybe for the first time. Patricia looked up slowly. The confident, controlling woman was gone. All that remained was someone terrified of losing the only person she had spent her life trying to control. When you married Olivia, she said softly to Mark, everything changed. You stopped asking me for advice. You made your own choices. She made you stronger, and I hated her for it. Mark's eyes filled with tears. So, you decided to kill her? Patricia covered her face. I convinced myself it was the only way, she admitted. I thought one day you'd thank me. I kept telling myself I was doing it for you. She shook her head. I was wrong. For the first time since I'd known Patricia, I wasn't looking at a woman pretending to be perfect. I was looking at someone whose need for control had destroyed everything she loved. I took a deep breath. The police deserve the truth, I said firmly. You tried to take my life. What happens next depends on you. Patricia nodded slowly. Without another word, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook. Everything is in here, she whispered. My research, my plans, when I planted the wolfsbane. I'll tell the police everything. Mark made the call. Patricia sat quietly as the reality of what she had done finally settled over her. A few minutes later, the sound of approaching sirens filled the street. Nothing would ever be the same again. I looked at Mark. His heart was broken, but I also saw something new in his eyes. Freedom. Together, we would face whatever came next. Sometimes the truth, no matter how painful, is the only path to healing. The months that followed were filled with police interviews, court hearings, and counseling sessions for our family. To everyone's surprise except mine, Patricia pleaded guilty to attempted murder. Maybe she finally realized that trying to control everyone had cost her the one thing she wanted most, her son's trust. On the day of her sentencing, I sat beside Mark in the courtroom, holding his hand tightly. Patricia looked nothing like the confident woman I had known. Dressed in a simple navy suit, she seemed exhausted and broken. When the judge allowed her to speak, she turned toward us. I spent my whole life trying to control everything, she said quietly. I convinced myself I knew what was best for my son. But that wasn't love. It was fear and control. I almost destroyed my family because of it. The courtroom fell silent. The judge sentenced her to 5 years in prison along with mandatory psychiatric treatment. As the officers led her away, she looked back one last time. For the first time, there was no anger, no manipulation, and no excuses. Only regret. After the hearing, Mark and I walked through the courthouse garden. I keep thinking about all the warning signs, he admitted. The way she treated you, the insults, the fake kindness. I should have seen it. I squeezed his hand. She was your mother. You wanted to believe the best in her.
He looked at me.
After everything she did, how can you still be so calm? I smiled softly. Because I refuse to let her actions control the rest of our lives. She's facing the consequences. That's enough. A few weeks later, I received a letter from Patricia's psychiatrist. With her permission, he explained that she had begun treatment for a serious personality disorder centered around an unhealthy need for control. For the first time, she was accepting help. Mark and I decided it was time for a fresh start. We sold our house and moved to a quiet neighborhood where painful memories wouldn't follow us every day. While packing, I found the recorder that had captured everything from that terrible dinner. "Should we keep it?" Mark asked. I looked at it for a moment before deleting every recording. "No," I said. "We don't need proof anymore. We need peace." Soon we settled into our new home. It had a beautiful backyard, and I started planting herbs again. Only safe ones this time. Every now and then, I would remember Patricia's wolfsbane. It reminded me that even the most beautiful things can become dangerous when they are driven by obsession instead of love. Mark visits Patricia once a month. I don't go, but every so often I send her a letter. Not because I've forgotten what happened, and not because forgiveness comes easily. I do it because I believe people can change when they truly choose to. Her replies are different now. They are honest, simple, free from manipulation. After one visit, Mark smiled sadly and said, "She's finally becoming the mother I always wished I had." Then he sighed. "I just wish it hadn't taken something so terrible." Last week, Patricia sent me a package. Inside was the journal she had written during her time in prison. The first page read, "Asterisk, I spent my life trying to control everyone else before realizing I was the one who needed help. I'm sorry it took nearly destroying my family for me to understand that." Asterisk. When I closed the journal, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time.
Peace.
The woman who once tried to poison me no longer defined my future. She was finally facing the truth about herself. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was an honest one. Today, Mark and I are expecting our first child. People sometimes ask if we're worried about Patricia being released one day. The answer is simple. We've learned that real strength doesn't come from controlling people. It comes from setting healthy boundaries, telling the truth, and allowing genuine change. The tea set from that night still sits in our kitchen cabinet. Not as a reminder of fear, but as a reminder that I survived. Sometimes I make myself a cup of tea, smile, and think about how far we've come. Because the greatest victory isn't revenge. It's healing. It's moving forward. And it's building a life that no one can take away.